Hello everybody, it's Patricia Worby, Alchemy Therapies, My Emotional Audit and the emotionalmasterclass.com. And today I wanted to talk about something that very few people know about or have heard about. And it's something that I didn't even know the name of until a client reminded me yesterday when we were working together of one of the symptoms of trauma, which I myself suffered from. This syndrome is called Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, okay? It's a real condition, but it's very, very rare, or supposedly very rare as a permanent condition. It's usually quite transient. And what it involves is a perceptive distortion of where your body is in space. Now, for me, that was to do with the size of my hands, would you believe? And I had this perception that my hands were twice the size that they actually are. Now, for people of a certain age, you might remember a British TV comedian called Kenny Everett. He was also a radio DJ, but he had a show on the TV, which when I was young, we kind of grew up with it. And he used to wear these really, really over large plastic hands, which he used to waggle around. And that's what my hands felt like they were really enormous. And it was really, really frightening because, you look at your hand and you can see it's the normal size, but your brain is telling you it's huge and it's massively kind of heavy and very, very strange indeed. With my client yesterday, it was in her feet. She felt like her feet and her legs were like massive and heavy, and she sort of likened it to feeling like she had elephant legs, and I said, oh, I know, I've heard of that and I've had it myself and I must look it up. So I did, I looked it up and I wanted to do a podcast on that because this condition, I believe, is more common than we think. And it's to do with inflammation within the neurological system and in the brain, obviously, because it's the brain that's interpreting what we call kinesthetic or proprioceptive. They're the same thing, but they have two different descriptions. Information, which means where your body is in space. So the limits of it, the size of it, and where it is relative to you. So the brain, of course, is responsible for interpreting that kind of information. And normally it gives us fairly accurate readouts. That's what enables us to balance, to stand upright, to dance, to drive or run, because we need to know where our body is in space. But what can happen with certain conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome, which is what I had, inflammation is the result of that, because it's a low energy syndrome. But there could be other reasons you could get it. It could be to do with an infection. It could be linked to migraines, actually, which are also inflammatory. And basically the information that's being transmitted by the nerves becomes distorted, I believe, because there's not enough energy in the system to transmit the messages properly. And so this kind of Alice in Wonderland syndrome is rare, as I've said, as a sort of permanent condition. But it is actually a real sign, if you've ever had any kind of feelings like that, that something is amiss in your neurological system. Now, it is healable, of course, because all of these conditions are healable, because basically low energy is a response to messages that the body believes it's under threat. And in order to heal that, you need to give the body messages of safety. And you may say, well, how can a migraine be linked to a message of threat? Well, it absolutely can, because these messages are often implicit, they're hidden, they're from past experience that the brain doesn't know is over. And they create this terrific stress response in the body, which creates this migrainous kind of over relaxation of your blood vessels into your brain, which is what a migraine is, because your nervous system, particularly the autonomic nervous system, loses control of what's the most appropriate action. And it overreacts because it believes you're under threat. And so migraines are a classic example of these kind of medically unexplained symptoms, and very linked to a stress-related situation. So if a child is growing up in chronic stress, as I was, migraines tend to be the result, and particularly usually around adolescence, when hormones are obviously already changing as well and add to the general disruption of the body. So migraines are not normal, and they are considered, unexplained, sort of one of the things that happens in medical science. Can't really explain them, but my belief is they result from this chronic stress burden of implicit memory, which may come from birth experience. It may come from growing up with one or both parents who don't emotionally support you in some way, a narcissistic parent, for instance, which is incredibly common. And that creates this sort of stress burden that the body interprets as an ongoing threat to you. And so your stress response system becomes deranged, literally deranged. It cannot modify itself appropriately. And so you get these symptoms. Other symptoms that kind of relate to this chronic sort of inability of the nervous system to relay the right information could be chronic pain. If you look at chronic pain as a syndrome, it's usually sensations in the body of distortion. So if you've had like a crash in a car, or you've had some kind of impact, the body kind of remembers that as a distortion, and it registers it, and it will actually replay that, but not as a sensation of movement, but as a sensation of pain, because it really cannot distinguish between those different signals. There is no such thing as a pain signal. There is only a signal, and then the brain's interpretation of that signal. So chronic pain is another classic example of one of these kind of distortions. It's like the amplifier is set up too high, and the brain isn't filtering properly. And that's another classic sign. You've got either a chronic stress situation in your life, or you've had past trauma, or both, which is the most common scenario that I find. So other examples, let's think, strange numbness or tingling in a body part, which is a form of dissociation, because something's happened in that body part. Something's happened to that body part. It's either had an accident, it's you've broken a bone, or you've been pushed or hit or slapped on that body part, or you've basically had to leave that body part for some reason mentally, because it's too painful to acknowledge. You get people who actually with certain brain states cannot acknowledge one side of their body. It's as if they don't have a left side. These things are all created by our brains, and they are really, really remarkable. Another symptom might be, a sort of form of ticklishness in a body part. So I've got experiences of doing massage on people who can't, one toe, for instance, will be just so ticklish, you can't touch it, and the person will literally jump off the bed if you touch it. Or you have a side of the body that it doesn't feel right, that feels numb to the touch compared to the other side. And it's very distressing for people to have these symptoms. But just for you to understand that they are not fixed. They are a perception disorder which needs to be healed via self-soothing, in other words, neurological regulation, because it's the fact that the neurology is a little unbalanced that's creating it. So if you're interested to hear any more about this, do look it up, by the way, Alice in Wonderland Syndrome. I will leave a little link at the bottom. There isn't much on it because it's, as I say, it's considered medically very, very rare. But I think if you understand that it's a form of dissociation in the body, and that relates to trauma, that's the bit that's missing from the medical understanding. They have no explanation for it whatsoever. So all I can tell you is now my hands feel a normal size, okay? I don't have that perceptive problem anymore. And I'm hoping my client as well will lose her sense of feeling like her legs are way too heavy, but she'd been triggered by a situation. And so understanding dissociation and the perceptive difficulties of the brain interpreting the information that it's getting are kind of two sides of the same coin, really, with regard to trauma. So trauma is in the body. Trauma is not a mental state. It's not a thought pattern. It's felt as a perceptive somatic state. So if you want to know more, get in contact, do comment, do ask me any questions. I'm very happy to debate with you. All right, take care, everybody. See you soon. Oh, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye for now. Bye.